Is it possible that this conversation is happening inside the metaverse created by you, by Meta, many years from now, and we're doing a memory replay experience?
I don't know the answer to that. Then I'd be some computer construct and not the person who created that Meta company. But that would truly be Meta.
Right? So this could be somebody else using the Mark Zuckerberg avatar who can do the Mark and the Lex conversation replay from 4 decades ago when Meta it was first sort of.
I mean, it's not going to be 4 decades before we have photorealistic avatars like this. So I think we're much closer to that.
Well, that's something you talk about is how passionate you are about the idea of the avatar representing who you are in the metaverse. So I do these podcasts in person. I'm a stickler for that because there's a magic to the in-person conversation. How long do you think it'll be before you can have the same kind of magic in the metaverse, the same kind of intimacy and the chemistry, whatever the heck is there when we're talking in person? How difficult is it? How long before we have it in the metaverse?
Well, I think this is like the key question, right? Because the thing that's different about virtual and hopefully augmented reality compared to all other forms of digital platforms before is this feeling of presence, right? The feeling that that you're in an experience and that you're there with other people or in another place. And that's just different from all of the other screens that we have today, right? Phones, TVs, all this stuff. It's, they're trying to, in some cases, deliver experiences that feel high fidelity, but at no point do you actually feel like you're in it, right? At some level, your content is trying to sort of convince you that this is a realistic thing that's happening, but all of the kind of subtle signals are telling you, no, you're looking at a screen. So the question about how you develop these systems is like, what are all of the things that make the physical world all the different cues? So I think on visual presence and spatial audio, we're making reasonable progress. Spatial audio makes a huge deal. I don't know if you've tried this experience, workrooms that we launch where you have meetings, and I basically made a rule for all of the top management folks at the company that they need to be doing standing meetings in workrooms already, right? I feel like we got to dog food this. This is how people are going to work in the future, so we have to adopt this now. And there are already a lot of things that I think feel significantly better than like typical Zoom meetings, even though the avatars are a lot lower fidelity. The idea that you have spatial audio, you're around a table in VR with people. If someone's talking from over there, it sounds like it's talking from over there. You can see, the arm gestures and stuff feel more natural. You can have side conversations, which is something that you can't really do in Zoom. I mean, I guess you can text someone over or like out of band, but if you're actually sitting around a table with people, you can lean over and whisper to the person next to you and like have a conversation that you can't, that you can't really do with in just video communication. So I think it's interesting in what ways some of these things already feel more real than a lot of the technology that we have, even when the visual fidelity isn't quite there. But I think it'll get there over the next few years. Now, I mean, you were asking about comparing that to the true physical world, not Zoom or something like that. And there, I mean, I think you have feelings of like temperature, olfactory, obviously touch, right? We're working on haptic gloves. The sense that you want to be able to, put your hands down and feel some pressure from the table. All these things I think are going to be really critical to be able to keep up this illusion that you're in a world and that you're fully present in this world. But I don't know, I think we're going to have a lot of these building blocks within, the next 10 years or so. And even before that, I think it's amazing how much you're just going to be able to build with software that sort of masks some of these things. I realize I'm going long, but I was told we have a few hours here.
Yeah,
so it's
we're here for 5 to 6 hours.
Yeah, so I mean, it's look. I mean that's on the shorter end of the congressional testimonies I've done. But it's but one of the things that we found with hand presence, right? So the earliest VR, you just have the headset, and then and that was cool. You could look around, you feel like you're in a place, but you don't feel like you're really able to interact with it until you have hands. And then there was this big question where once you got hands, what's the right way to represent them? And initially, all of our assumptions was, okay, when I look down and see my hands in the physical world, I see an arm, and it's going to be super weird if you see, just your hand. Um, but it turned out to not be the case, because there's this issue with your arms, which is like, what's your elbow angle? And if the elbow angle that we're kind of interpolating based on where your hand is and where your headset is actually isn't accurate, it creates this very uncomfortable feeling where it's like, oh, like my arm is actually out like this, but it's like showing it in here. And that actually broke the feeling of presence a lot more. Whereas it turns out that if you just show the hands and you don't show the arms, it actually is fine for people. So I think that there's a bunch of these interesting psychological cues where it'll be more about getting the right details right. And I think a lot of that will be possible even over, a few year period or a 5-year period. And we won't need like every single thing to be solved to deliver this like full sense of presence.
Yeah, it's a fascinating psychology question of what is the essence that makes in-person conversation special. It's like emojis are able to convey emotion really well, even though they're obviously not photorealistic. And so in that same way, just like you're saying, just showing the hands is able to create a comfortable expression with your hands. So I wonder what that is. People in the world wars used to write letters, and you can fall in love with just writing letters.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to see each other in person. You can convey emotion. You can convey depth of experience with just words. So that's I think a fascinating place to explore psychology of like, how do you find that intimacy?
Yeah. And, the way that I come to all of this stuff is, I basically studied psychology and computer science. So all of the work that I do is sort of at the intersection of those things. I think most of the other big tech companies are building technology for you to interact with. What I care about is building technology to help people interact with each other. So I think it's a somewhat different approach than most of the other tech entrepreneurs and big companies come at this from. And a lot of the lessons in terms of how I think about designing products come from some just basic elements of psychology, right? In terms of, our brains, you can compare to the brains of other animals, we're very wired to specific things, facial expressions, right? I mean, we're very visual, right? So compared to other animals, I mean, that's clearly the main sense that most people have. But there's a whole part of your brain that's just kind of focused on reading facial cues. So, when we're designing the next version of Quest or the VR headset, a big focus for us is face tracking and basically eye tracking so you can make eye contact, which again isn't really something that you can do over a video conference. It's sort of amazing how much, how far video conferencing has gotten without the ability to make eye contact, right? It's sort of a bizarre thing if you think about it. You're like looking at someone's face, sometimes for, an hour when you're in a meeting, and like you looking at their eyes to them doesn't look like you're looking at their eyes. So it's a...
Yeah, you're always looking, past each other, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess you're right. You're not sending
Well,
that
you're
signal.
trying to.
Right, you're trying
like
to.
a lot of times, or at least I find myself, I'm trying to look into the other person's eyes.
But they don't feel like you're looking to their
So then the question is, all right, am I supposed to look at the camera so that way you can, have a sensation that I'm looking at you? I think that's an interesting question. And then, with VR today, even without eye tracking and knowing what your eyes are actually looking at, you can fake it reasonably well, right? So you can look at like where the head poses, and if it looks like I'm kind of looking in your general direction, then you can sort of assume that maybe there's some eye contact intended, and you can do it in a way where it's like, okay, maybe it's not a fixated stare, but it's somewhat natural. But once you have actual eye tracking, you can do it for real. And I think that that's really important stuff. So when I think about Meta's contribution to this field, I have to say it's not clear to me that any of the other companies that are focused on the metaverse or on virtual and augmented reality are going to prioritize putting these features in the hardware, because like everything, they're trade-offs, right? I mean, it adds some weight to the device. Maybe it adds some thickness. You could totally see another company taking the approach of let's just make the lightest and thinnest thing possible. But I want us to design the most human thing possible, that creates the richest sense of presence. And because so much of human emotion and expression comes from these like micro movements. If I like move my eyebrow, millimeter, you will notice, and that like means something. So the fact that we're losing these signals in a lot of communication, I think is a loss. And it's not like, okay, there's one feature and you add this, then it all of a sudden is going to feel like we have real presence. You can sort of look at how the the human brain works and how we express and kind of read emotions. And you can just build a roadmap of that, of just what are the most important things to try to unlock over a 5 to 10 year period, and just try to make the experience more and more human and social.